right now we're in the US on the verge of a government shutdown. We're currently at 86% according to Polymarket, and we're at 89% chance of a government shutdown in 2025. And if these trends continue, by the time that this video has finished uploading and by the time you're watching, the government has already gone into a shutdown. Now, for the length of the shutdown, there's been some pretty big moves in the betting markets. Right now, 10 through 29 days is at 33%, 4 through 9 days is at 26%, 1 through 3 days is at 16%, and 30 plus days is at 15.3%. So there's, beyond the actual prediction markets, some real winners and losers. There are going to be some basic economic principles that decide who wins and who loses. And one of the biggest is the part where we are living in a K-shaped economy. And the top half of the K is the stock market, the upper class, basically people who own assets. Right now, for the last week, as there's been an increasing likelihood of shutdown, the stock market has gone from consistently going up to being basically even. I would guess that if there was going to be an actual shutdown, then that would go back to being even some more. But as soon as the government goes to being open again, I would expect the stock market to go from being even to shooting back up and improving, as it's been doing for the last month, and as it's been doing for a lot longer than just the last month. The losers are the people who don't get paychecks because the government is shut down, government employees. There's the people who are potentially laid off or fired because they work for the government and they're not an essential worker, and so they don't even get to show up to work. They don't even get to do their job. They don't even get to get paid. They might not even have a job by the time the government reopens again. That's sort of to be determined. Those are the people that lose the most, and these are people with families, and these are people that go to grocery stores and support local businesses. When it comes to the balance of power in the United States government, the big winner is the executive branch, the office of the president. The president gets emergency powers to decide how to spend money when the government is shut down. Normally Congress gets to decide that, but when the government is shut down, the executive branch gets to decide much more who gets to continue to work, who has to stop working, who has to come into the office, who isn't allowed to come into the office. And so the loser here is the legislative branch. The Congress is supposed to be spending money. It's supposed to pass a budget. It's not spending money. It's not passing a budget. The Supreme Court has sort of allowed the executive branch to take more and more power away from Congress. And a lot of the reason why this has happened is that Congress hasn't been doing its job. A lot of the times when Congress passes regulations that give the executive branch more power, they do that with not a lot of oversight because Congress is too busy trying to pass a budget, as opposed to get into the nitty-gritty of regulating the environment or all sorts of other parts of the economy. And so the more that Congress struggles to pass a budget, the less it has time to do regulating, the more power that the executive branch has over all of these different aspects of the federal government. And the more that the judicial branch, the Supreme Court, is likely to allow the president to go along and do all of these things that sort of get tracked as emergency powers, but historically the government doesn't get shut down this much. Historically, Congress has their finger on the pulse a lot better. So these are not historically normal times. That sort of gets rolled into overall considerations of who gains more power, the executive branch, who loses more power, the legislative branch. In terms of the broader populace, I think political polarization also is a big winner. Not necessarily a winner for people, because political polarization isn't a good thing. Division isn't a good thing. The more power that the executive branch has, the more consequential the president is going to be, the more the election is going to matter. And that's going to make every 4 years be more and more important to have a bigger and bigger election. Conversely, the loser is going to be the moderates. When the government is shutting down, when the government is on the verge of shutting down, right after a government shutdown, this is a bad time to say that everything is working as intended. Congress isn't working as intended during a government shutdown. And that's just all very bad optics for moderates. Speaking of optics, let's talk quickly what the government shutdown looks like. There's not necessarily votes during a government shutdown, because the way that the filibuster works in the Senate is that it stops a vote from happening. That being said, every day or two, or even as many times as Republicans want, they can force a vote where essentially all Republicans are saying that they want to keep the government open, and all Democrats have to vote saying that they want to keep the government closed. At some point, the optics for that stop looking good for Democrats. But then again, when the government is shut down and the president is laying people off and not giving people paychecks, that doesn't look good for Trump and Republicans either. So I wouldn't say that any particular politician, any particular political party looks good in this exchange. You could say that Trump and the Republicans might advance their agenda more, but that doesn't make them any more popular. And you might say that the Democrats don't necessarily advance their agenda, but that doesn't necessarily make them any less popular. So those are overall my winners and losers. So what do you think?